Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. We're going to finish up this week's theme of blank of the blank, taking a look at tracks whose titles are something of the something. Today we're going to be looking at the song The Face of the Deep by Chris Christodoulou. This comes from the Risk of Rain 2 Survivors of the Void original soundtrack, and a little bit of transparency here. I have heard this song before. Not in isolation. I'm a huge fan of Risk of Rain. I have too many hours in it. This is the track that plays during the final hidden secondary boss fight. And I know a couple of the ideas that are coming up in it, overarching emotions and stuff like that, instruments that are used. But like I said, I've never listened to it on its own, only as background to an extremely intense fight. So I haven't really had a chance to ever really listen to it and hear what it's doing. So this is going to be a joy. I do need to dive into this soundtrack. I've listened to a ton of the original Risk of Rain 2 soundtrack, and just haven't gotten around to checking out the DLC soundtrack yet. But with all that said, let's dive into this, The Face of the Deep. Very epic, very large, lots of octave harmonies. Hitting that groove. Loving that. Super groovy bass and drum underneath all this, really creating that syncopated rhythmic section. Passing this idea of the falling and rising movement from one instrument to the next. This chiptune bouncing around the sound sphere. So we are in a 10 beat phrase. I'm not sure if it's 10-4 or 2 bars of 5-4, but there's a lot of rhythmic disjointedness that we still have a cymbal laying this down here. Yeah, based on our drum patterns, we are in 5-4. Both the guitar and the sax is having these really high, holding these tones out and then movement and then just really wailing on them. So much movement. Got the panning. What? Oh. Whoa, 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 whoa. Do we have a 5 against 4 polyrhythm in there? Yeah, we have moved to a 4-4. Very slow and rigid, though. Wow. Oh, wow. Like I had mentioned, I've heard bits and pieces of that, but in the middle of a video game, you're usually, especially an intense fight, usually not really focusing entirely on the music. So I've heard bits and pieces of that, but not in that entirety. And I find it interesting though, because the boss fight exists in three phases, and there are three different sets to this song. There's the opening idea before the sax comes in. There is our solo section where two saxophones, a guitar, and an organ, synthesizer, piano, something in that range, keyboard, um, maybe an organ. I think it is an organ. They alternate solo sections, and then we get our heavy outro, our chaotic outro. I think there's another mini solo in there, and then the halftime feel, and just the super chaotic element to it all. And I wonder if they correlate to the different stages of the battle, but what I'm more interested in is where the loops exist. We've checked out some video game music before, and a lot of it, we've checked out like two tracks from Near Autonoma, and I think those have always been like cutscene based, so it's more of a constrained segment of the video game. One of them I think was a credit scene, and you can, as a composer, you can dictate exactly what's going to happen. Whereas something like this that's going on while the player has control, you don't know exactly what's going on, and the length of time that this segment needs to play is different for different plays. So, usually, like when we've checked out the stuff that Zun has made for, oh man, the fans are gonna, Toho. I was gonna say, if I forget this, the fans are gonna be upset with me. Um, we've checked out some of Zun's work for that series of game. A lot of it is during action sequences, and the songs themselves actually have the loops in them. I typically hear the phrase itself twice when we've checked them out. And here, though, I'm curious because, like, I can kind of hear how this ending kind of can loop back to the beginning because it ended with like really heavy rock style syncopated drum hits. Um, and we kind of started with that, so maybe it can loop back on itself like that. But I also feel the three segments, and I'm curious, like I said, if they're supposed to represent the three stages of the boss, but they're always played linearly like this, or if each segment can be looped upon itself. I don't know. It also feels highly disjointed if we did that because I think the song works really well as a single 5-minute track. Because if the middle segment is just solos, I don't know if that would keep the intensity throughout. I don't know. I just have a couple questions. It really makes me want to go back and play this today, right now, like as soon as I finish this, and just kind of like maybe find an invulnerability mod or something and just kind of sit there and listen to what the music's doing during the boss segment. Um, yeah. Anyways, fantastic work. Like I'm a huge fan. I already mentioned that I've listened to Risk of Rain 2 soundtrack before, which was also written by Chris. And I've really enjoyed the moments that I've heard from the expanded soundtrack in the new levels and stuff. But I haven't really given this soundtrack an isolated listen yet, and I need to. But yeah, Chris is just a fantastic composer. I absolutely love listening to his work. So let's dive into this. I've kind of gushed about this for 4 minutes now, about as long as the the song was. Um, yeah, let's dive into the music. What's going on here. So I mentioned I kind of feel it in three parts. We're gonna take them one by one. The opening part was interesting because it's familiar to me. And off the top of my head, I want to say it comes from something in the original game before the expansion, and I think it's also a boss theme, so it's going to be Mithrix's theme. Um, but I might be a little off on that. But if so, I think it's cool that we start with that and then we move into this one. And I think it shows a continuation of ideas musically, moving from one boss to the next. Um, and through that, maybe we can see a little bit of continuity. But being that I haven't listened to the other theme recently enough to have it really fresh in my mind, I don't want to make too many comparisons to it. But I don't know if that's true. I kind of like that continuity there. We start out though with some drums and the bass comes in, and we start with our really interesting rhythmic idea. I don't remember what instrument had this. It was a lead idea, but it's that do 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 do, and it's this constant falling theme, right? Constant falling. That is a musical direction we hear a lot in this track, whether it's in this opening riff, the solos, our outro idea. It is all over the place. Um, and I don't want to make like too many connections because I don't know a lot of the lore of this game. A lot of it is sort of obfuscated through like logs and text and stuff. Um, it's not a game that's really story heavy on the front. It's a game that's sort of gameplay first, and if you want to dig in, there's a lot of text to read to get the story. But the idea is that this boss exists deep within the void in the planetarium, and the void is heavily water based as far as theme goes, visual theme, character design, and stuff like that. And I almost want to say that this being the final part of the game would also be the deepest aspect of the void. So this idea of falling to get to this boss and falling being an aspect of the boss theme might tie into that a little bit, which is pretty cool. Maybe there's also some lore about the boss, 'cause I don't know. Yeah, it's called the Voidling, and I don't know anything about it. You just fight it. Like I said, there's text that I haven't dug into, but yeah, there's this idea of falling all throughout this track, though. And the other thing that caught me off guard here was it was really difficult for me to get a grasp on the meter because we had these different pockets. Sometimes it was 5 notes of falling, sometimes three, sometimes two, I think four a couple of times. And it just seems very difficult to grasp the larger pattern. And it wasn't until I heard a cymbal, real rigid, and I counted it and I was like, okay, we got 10 beats here. And that cymbal is laying down the downbeats. And not too long after this, I counted out that we were in 5/4 because of a drum pattern at the beat five of every five beat pattern. We had a little bit of a drum fill. So I kind of landed on that idea. We're in 5/4, but we have this very disjointed rhythmic vibe to it, right? Normally we would have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or we would emphasize 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we'd have a pocket of three and a pocket of two, or a pocket of two and a pocket of three to emphasize. That's the two main pulses of 5/4. Here, though, we sometimes get that. If we lead with 4 hits, we got da 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 da. Now we're on beat 3, so we have 1 and 3 being emphasized. But I don't feel like that always happens. Sometimes we get a pocket of 5, which means our next hit, which is going to be when we rise back up to the top to do our descending idea again, is going to be on the and of 3. Yeah, which is just an odd place to have it, and that's part of what makes it feel so rhythmically disjointed. Is that there's just a lot of components to it where the pattern needs to be seen from a much higher place. You can't see it on a 1 bar pattern, maybe even not a 4 bar pattern. Sometimes some of these lines just need um, a large amount of bars to see exactly where the overarching ideas are, where this pattern loops back, stuff like that. So we get a strong, almost polyrhythmic feel going on here, where we have this strong downbeat being emphasized in a cymbal, but it's kind of pushed back in the mix. And the things that are capturing your attention, which are the lead lines, some of the louder drum parts, the bass, the rhythm that the bass is playing, and some of its funky syncopated stuff, it's all funky and syncopated. It's all pushing against the beat. It's all varying accents. It's really difficult to find that pattern. And again, though, just it's really interesting listening to this, knowing its placement in the multimedia work, and kind of understanding more about both the music and the video game. Um, I'm gonna try to stick with the music now. I don't know how much you guys want to learn about this game, but yeah, it's just really cool because the void is sort of this unknowable section. It's a brand new addition. There hasn't been any research into it. It wasn't present in the first Risk of Rain. Like, it's this unknown otherworldly realm sort of. And for the music to be so disjointed and difficult to grasp and difficult to understand what's going on fits perfectly with the vibe of the realm. Um, which is just that's just Chris, man. Chris's writing is so good. Um, but yeah, so our opening is really defined by this, while also, at least to me, getting sort of a jazz fusion, prog rock kind of vibe with I mean, it reminds me a lot of bands like Dream Theater or even a little bit of Yes, later Yes, getting into, the strong organ involvement and, the rhythmic, the jaggedy rhythms that are utilized. So we kind of have this prog rock, prog metal kind of um, audioscape with the instruments that we have, the timbres that are being used. And to me, we have a throwback to sort of that experimental phase of 70s prog rock and jazz fusion, really exploring those types of rhythms that they went looking for. And it's really interesting to hear all this paired together in a way that, knowing how it fits in a larger multimedia piece, really works. This is one of those situations, like many we've had in the past, where knowing context does help understanding. And it's kind of it's 50-50, right? I am getting a little bit more out of this in the analysis, but I'm also speaking less about the music because I understand its placement in a larger context. And this is something that came up. Uh, you know what? I feel like this is already going to be a long video. We'll talk about that another day. Maybe an isolated video. Should I do blogs? I don't know. I'm getting way off topic here. Or vlogs. That's what they're called now, right? A blog would be a typing post. Anyways, so after this section, though, we enter into the solo section. I really like this because one of my big problems with jazz fusion, later jazz fusion, is that they took the sound and experimentation of jazz and paired it with the experimentation of rock, prog rock, but they didn't carry over the solos, the improvised solos. And I don't know if these are improvised. It's possible they're not. but they feel improvised to me, which I think is the important part. Um, and so this is later jazz fusion while still having some of that earlier jazz fusion uh, elements carrying from traditional jazz, such as these improvised solos. We have, normally jazz would be AABA, where we have our core chorus, right? The hook of the song, what everybody knows, the main melody or maybe the main lyrics. And then you do that twice. You go into your solo section. This can be as long as you want. And then you finish out on that hook. I kind of thought we were going to go that direction. We had a pretty lengthy opening idea that showcased the main themes, and then we entered in an elongated solo section, and I really love this part. The saxophone, both of them. Were they the same sax? I think it's weird that they would have a saxophone, guitar, same saxophonist, and then organ, keyboard. So I'm kind of wondering if there's two saxophone players here so that everybody gets one solo. But what I really loved here is that there is a there's a power to all this. And I kind of alluded to this earlier on in the track, talking about how we opened up the song with these octave harmonies that really, octave is the strongest, the most stable harmony you can have. The next strongest would be the fifth. So to have these octaves, and also, I don't know if I've talked about this before, power chords are octaves and fifths. That's it. It's a combination of the fifth and the octave. There's your power chord. That's why they sound so good. It's why they sound so powerful. It's why metal has that strength. They literally took the two strongest note relationships and put them together and said that's the chord that's going to define our genre. Anyways, getting back to this though, there's all this strength, right? In our opening idea, it's very powerful. It's very looming, right? What I really love about this section is it takes a lot of those characteristics of strength and power and infuses them with that unknowingness, right? Um, and the descent, both of those, especially when we look at our first saxophone solo, a lot of this is holding out a note and just really putting the air pressure through it, getting these really strong sounds that are even beginning to crack a little bit to get that extra little bit of distortion from playing too loud, or not technically too loud, too much air pressure. And you're really getting that blasting tone out of the horn and utilizing that with a higher pitch, and it sounds just like a scream, like a wailing. And you just get that and you get this idea, this power, this strength combined with the descent concept. And I really love capturing the ideas, the themes of this song in the solo itself. And then we kind of moved from that to the guitar, and the guitar continues this idea. We have more of these wailing and descending ideas. Both of these instruments decide to put in some little melody, some runs, some flourishes among them to kind of spice it up, but it's still a very difficult to understand solo for both of them. It is a bit abrasive at times. It does tend to break outside of the rhythm at times, even though at this point I think we've shifted to the 4/4. Um, it still pushes against that core pulse. It still has these disjointed rhythmic structures. Some of the notes, a lot of the notes, are really kind of pulled outside the key. It's very, very tasteful, but there's several segments that begin to feel like they approach into a chromatic vibe. And through that, once again, it becomes very difficult to grasp what's happening here between the speed and the rhythmic complexity and, the almost the tossing out of the key, saying we're going to play whatever we want. And we hear a lot of that. We move into the second saxophone solo and the piano, and these start to bring it down a little bit as far as intensity goes. Not the piano, the organ. They bring it down in intensity a little bit, but not a lot. And it's mostly because they approach intensity in different ways. Our second saxophone approaches intensity through speed. I don't think if I remember correctly, our second saxophone solo did not have a lot of those long held out notes. It was really about just jamming right through. It's this raw strength, raw power, raw speed, and basically brute forcing through a solo. And then our organ came through and introduced intensity through microtonality through the use of the mod wheel, the pitch wheel, so that when they decide to hold a note, they can ease into notes adjacent to it without actually pushing to that next half step up or half step down, finding the tones between the Western music's 12 notes. And they create tension through that because if you have, okay, so think of it this way. Instead of microtonality, think of it as just being in tune. You're literally taking a note and shifting it, making it slightly sharper, raising its pitch just a little bit. So it's still picking a random note. You're still playing an F, but now it's a little sharper than being in tune with everybody else, and that's going to introduce dissonance. And that dissonance is going to create tension. And that's where the organ or the synth player, whatever, or keyboards, whatever, brings in intensity in their style, is by utilizing the mod wheel to find those tones in between that can increase the dissonance of some sections. And really just having a bit more fluidity than the other three notes or the other three instruments in their note choices. And I love how each of these instruments find a different way to create music that sort of sits in between the bounds of what everything else is doing underneath. I wish I had checked out more of what was happening underneath actually, because I bet there was some really cool funky stuff going on, much like our opening and closing, but I really was paying strong attention to the solos as they were not only intricate but also interesting. I didn't really get a chance to see what the bass or the drums were doing. I didn't really talk about it either in our opening section, but they were funky. They had some fun syncopated things going on. And just, yeah, I need to listen to this. I need to listen to the whole album, of course. I already said that, but yeah, I definitely need to give this another listen. Um, so we have all this just display of chaos, right? Lots of wailing notes, mid two notes, if that's what you want to call it. We're just gonna call it microtonal stuff, though. The wailing, the intensity, the dissonance, speed, just all of this sound. It's a very driving section. This is very much jazz fusion by way of modern prog rock or even prog metal, if we want to include some of the lighter prog metal side, like Dream Theater, right? And it's just a very abrasive midsection here, and it takes us into the most chaotic moment of the song, which I just realized that the intensity continues to rise throughout this track. It is palatable but rhythmically difficult to get a grasp on at the beginning, and then we enter into chaotic melody writing with our solos and finding different ways to include tension into that. And now we're getting into the most tense section, which is loud, abrasive, abrasive. We have metal riffs that come in here. Our guitar tone adds a little bit of extra distortion and drive to it just to give it that little extra bite. And we really kind of get into the heaviness of this song and taking this intensity to its next level, which is weight. And we experience a few different styles of weight, which, going back to the idea that this realm, the void, is sort of based off of the ocean. The deeper you get, the heavier the heavier the ocean gets, the more water pressure is put on the object. So yeah, much like when we checked out the Ocean's Pelagial, was that the album we checked out? The one that was themed about going into the mind while simultaneously having the metaphor of descending into an ocean. Yeah, this is that same idea. The further we get into the song, the heavier, the more chaotic, the weightier it gets, and we just continue to push in this direction. I love it. So good. Theme. Um, and we get to a point where it's basically, a metal song, right? We have that biting guitar. We've slowed down a lot of this. We've pushed the 4/4. We've kind of got away from some of those chunkier rhythmic riffs and kind of went towards just this rule of cool texture of really like laying into this. And halfway through it, we even cut into a halftime feel and just really allow the song to come down to a stop, right? It's a breakdown, right? Chris puts a breakdown, a metal breakdown into the end of this track, and it ends with just this thonking, this chunking, like a giant mechanical golem taking these slow, massive, weighty steps. And right when I thought it was over, we kicked back into it. Did not expect that to happen. Caught me off guard, but I quite enjoyed it. I thought the song was really going to end there, but it's a fake out, and I'm trying to remember if there was a fake out in the boss fight, but I don't think there is. One of the few things I haven't been able to tie back to the game yet. Um, but yeah, just like I don't really know any way that you could end this. I don't know if it should end. It kind of ends with this drumming idea that, like I said, I feel like it could loop back to the beginning. Um, and start the track over again. So maybe there isn't a good way to end this because it's video game background music and it can't really have a proper end because it needs to be able to be loopable. But I don't know how I would have ended this. I really don't. There's so many different directions it could have gone in if it was a more isolated track in a vacuum instead of part of a multimedia work. But I do think Chris did a fantastic job at finding a bit of finality while also allowing it to be loopable. When the track was over, I don't feel like I was let down. I feel like we reached a sort of resolution. We reached an ending. Even if it does feel like it could loop back, it also feels fine stopping where it was at, which is a bit unusual. Like I said, in the video game music that I've listened to. Uh, because it needs to be able to be continuous. You can't really have those breaks, or else it kind of the player can feel that momentum loss, right? As you end the song and maybe start it back up again or whatever. Yeah, this was phenomenal though. I'm so happy I got to break this down on the channel. And I hope this does bring more eyes to Chris's work. I'm a huge fan of both of these soundtracks, and I highly suggest if you enjoyed this to check out more. If you enjoyed this primarily because of the jazz fusion angle, I'm not going to say everything from the album is going to work for you, but there's a lot of really great stuff on there. It's a bit varied because it goes across different areas of this planet and goes into the moon of the planet. So like each area has its own theme, and they're all not going to sound the same. It's not a super cohesive album in that sense. Everything fits for what it does in the game. But yeah, I don't think there's a single track on there that I would skip. Like I said, I'm eager to get into this one. I don't remember any saxophone being on the original soundtrack either, which was a really neat change. And I absolutely loved it. So those are my thoughts on Chris Christodoulou's The Face of the Deep. This is where you guys come in. Hit me up in the comments. Let me know what you thought of this track. Anything that stood out to you? Anything that bounced off of you that you'd like to correct me on, or add on to what I was talking about, or anything like that? Let me know. When you're done commenting, you can head up to the description box, and there is a link for Linktree. It'll take you to this menu right here. It has links for everything related to the channel. You can pick up some merch. Follow me on Discord, support the channel through Patreon, donate and get a special selection. Email me. I don't know. There's a lot of stuff, man. Go ahead and check it out. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, ring the bell. Greatly appreciate all three of those. All right, that wraps that one up. That is our last blank of the blank. Phenomenal way to end that week. However, there is still one video left in the week. And that's the one that came out 4 minutes ago. If you're watching this the moment it dropped, it is our creator request for the week, which is where a usually smaller band gets in contact with me and asks me to check out their music. That band is called The Harbinger, and I'm looking forward to it, as I always am. I really love doing this stuff. We always find some really good music this way. New stuff on the fringe, stuff that a lot of ears and eyes aren't getting on yet. Found some real gems through this creator request program, so that's cool. Anyways, if none of that interests you, though, I will be back tomorrow. We're going to do our album review. I think it's Mastodon. I got to double check that. And Sunday, we'll have a live stream for the patrons that will be available for everybody either Sunday evening or Monday morning. It really depends on, uh, if it gets blocked or not. That is a huge component of how long it takes to get that available out for everybody. And then Monday, we'll start our next week's theme, which is emo, which I'm very sad about, which is funny, emo sad, because I don't have my hair for emo week anymore. I got a surprise for all you guys though. So we'll do something. Emo Bryan's coming back. He just won't have hair. All right, well, until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening whenever you choose to watch my videos.